invested something like $300,000 on the day of the IPO, and I ended up making closer to $500,000 in profit. So I made $500,000 for what? Logging in and clicking a few buttons. That is the power of an IPO. The rest of my investments, I'm never gonna have that in a couple of days, in a couple of hours.
Welcome to Money Musings, a podcast that breaks down money, investing, and wealth with zero BS and unapologetic irreverence. I'm your host and money co-conspirator, Stephanie Zenos. Let's get into it.
Okay, so I went through a really interesting experience with a friend this week related to an IPO. Now, those of you who know me know I worked at SpaceX, and obviously or not, I got SpaceX stock while I worked there. I worked there for 8 years. To me, it felt like dog years personally. So I worked there for a lifetime, and I have my first shares I got around 2010. So I've been, 16 years I've had SpaceX shares kind of waiting for this moment when SpaceX might IPO. Now, my long-term plan was to travel the world, keep as much SpaceX stock as I could. And then when they actually went public one day, sell everything. And of course, this is a basic plan, sell everything and buy my dream home in California. Well, I already bought my dream home in California this year. And now Uncle Elon is talking about going public. So we're looking at maybe best case scenario, an IPO in June or July. And IPOs can be crazy, absolutely insane. And the worst part is, as someone who's been waiting 16 years, I will probably be locked out, meaning I won't be able to actually sell any of my shares for something like maybe 6 months. During that 6 months, the IPO price is going to be all over the place because this is going to be the biggest IPO of all time. When SpaceX goes public, probably a lot of people are going to want a piece. And I know that people have their opinions about Elon. Don't at me, bro, But I really think that Uncle Elon is trying to do the best he can to solve the problems that he thinks are the main world problems. Anyway, enough about Uncle Elon. The point is, this IPO is coming up on the horizon, and it's a huge milestone in my life, probably the biggest financial milestone that I will ever have in my life. And I've been thinking a lot about it, and I've been planning around it, and I've been talking to people, talking to myself, talking to AI, trying to figure out exactly how I would structure my response to an IPO. Now, of course, like I said, I'll be locked out for 6 months, and anything can happen in 6 months. The price could 10x, the price could drop. By the time I can actually sell, the price could be way lower. I could actually just lose money on the entire process. So there's no way to know. However, I did go through the process of a teeny tiny IPO this week with Fundrise. So Fundrise has a fund called the Innovation Fund, and it's a lot of private AI companies. I've been investing in that fund for years. However, I had only invested little teeny pieces. Now, I heard that this fund was going to go public, and I was like, wow, I have no idea what that means, but I'm so excited to go through that process because it will help me to get ready for the process of SpaceX going public. So I have invested something like $30,000 in Fundrise over a period of years in this innovation fund. They have companies like Anthropic, OpenAI, really big names. They also own SpaceX, coincidentally, which is a newer addition and kind of funny, regardless. So this IPO was finally announced. It was last Thursday that Fundrise was going to IPO. Now, this is an IPO of private companies under the umbrella of a fund. So it's really interesting. And that means that for the first time, normal people can go in their brokerage account and buy this fund that has private companies. Historically, normal people couldn't do that. Normal people would have to be accredited investors and have a certain amount of money or make a certain amount of money to go in and buy stuff from private companies. So this is kind of historic in and of itself. And this IPO has been bonkers bananas. At the very top, I had $30,000 invested. It's locked up for 6 months. I think I saw it today get to 1.2 million. If you can imagine $30,000 turning into 1.2 million in a couple of days, that was wild. And I'm pretty cool. I think part of the reason why I'm so good at investing is because I'm cool. I am very calm in these environments. I get excited, but I don't do things out of excitement. I get scared, but I don't do things out of fear. I come up with a plan ahead of time and I execute, and that's what makes me a great investor. So I'm going to tell you a story about how I planned and executed on this IPO and how I brought my friend into it and she did it with me. Okay, I knew I was going to be locked up for 6 months and I was like kind of frustrated because like, okay, it's only $30,000, but on paper now it looks like it's 1.2 million and I can't touch it and it could be worth like 15,000 by the time I can actually touch it. So what I did was on day one of the IPO, I went ahead and purchased some shares in my accounts that were liquid. Meaning if it went up, I could sell. So now I have this chunk that's locked up in this special brokerage account because I owned it before it was public. But the day it went public, I went and purchased some just through my normal investing accounts. But the important part is I made a plan. So I made this investment, I had this chunk, and then I already saw that it was like shooting up and I was like, dang, I missed this price. Like I wanted this price. I literally have limit orders still open for $45. Today it hit $550. So it's hilarious that I set a limit order trying to buy some at $45. I missed that window, but I got a lot that first day. And then I sat and I came up with a plan. Now my friend, I brought her in on it too. And she was like, how do you do this for an IPO? I was like, well, first of all, let's figure out what is responsible for you to invest, because for a normal investor, an IPO is extremely risky because it's extremely volatile. You can miss that window and then end up losing money. It's just bananas, honestly. It's almost not investing because it's just so bananas. But we talked through her entire portfolio and we chose a percentage of it. I want to say she ended up choosing 30% of her portfolio, which is a lot. But it was a small portfolio and it was new to her. And she was like, genuinely, when I asked the question, what if you lost all this money? She's like, I'd be fine. Like, it's fine. So I was like, okay. So we invested that chunk. Mine was very different than hers because my situation in life is very different than hers. But that's how I kind of structured her through this IPO thing. As someone with rock solid psychology around investing, this IPO was a lot. And I'm so glad that I got this experience because I know it's going to inform so much of my experience when SpaceX goes public. I'm coming up with a strategy for that already, like how I'm going to handle myself, what I'm going to do, at what points I would sell, at what prices I would sell, what percents, the whole thing. And I'm coming up with a lot of different methodologies and different ways to stress test it. But the point is like this investing is not necessarily for the faint of heart. This is why we say that it's better to have a really solid foundation of low cost, low fee index funds and like get your bases covered that way. And then if you want to go out and do some wild shit with a small percentage of your portfolio, like you have my blessing, but make sure that you have your bases covered first. And on the flip side of that, like we also talk about investing in hedges. So I like to think about it like unicorn hunting and hedges. And hedges are the things that we buy and we invest in that will protect us in case shit hits the fan. And unicorns are the things we buy and invest in that might just like pop off and end up moving the needle significantly in our portfolio, even though they're a small percent. So I hope that makes sense. And no one might be just like rambling. I'm excited about this whole thing, but it was very cool to bring my friend in this with me. And for the first time, like coach someone through that process of the IPO. So yeah, it actually wasn't that hard. Like it made a lot of sense. We looked at everything from like her risk tolerance, her overall amount of money, how much would be considered a win for her, what she was willing to lose, the whole process. And then you can literally automate all of that in your accounts. So at the end of the day, just to do a little hair toss here, I think my Roth IRA was where I purchased this. And I did that for a damn good reason. And that's because it grows tax free. So any money I made in there, I was not going to pay taxes on. That is the most cuckoo bananas part of all, in my opinion. So the fact of the matter is I invested something like $300,000 on the day of the IPO, and I ended up making about closer to $500,000 like in profit. So I made $500,000 for what? Logging in and clicking a few buttons and also knowing a lot about investing, doing my research, coming up with a plan, executing without my psychology getting in the way. I will give myself a little credit there, but that is the power of an IPO. The rest of my investments, like I'm never going to have that probably in a couple of days, in a couple of hours. That is truly exceptional. And for most, that would be a once in a lifetime experience. But for me, it's a huge motivator because again, that is money that I can use to retire my mom or support a friend or send money to a school that they're building in Costa Rica. All of the things that I love to give my money to. And it's just there for the taking with a little bit of education. And I'm really feeling that flow and that process of money moving in and out with so much fluidity and flexibility. And it's feeling so good because it used to be hard for me to ask for money. It used to be hard for me to receive money, and it used to be hard for me to spend money and invest money. And now it's all fucking easy. So if that's not a win, I don't know what it is.
Thanks for allowing me to be part of your money journey. If you heard something that made you think in a new way or expanded your views about money today, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave me a cute little note in the form of a review. See you next time. As always, a quick but important reminder that everything I share here is solely for the purpose of your entertainment, education, and inspiration. Nothing in this podcast should be taken as personal financial, legal, or investment advice. Everyone's financial situation is wildly different, and that's why it's so important that you do your own research and decide what's right for you.